So for each of these graphs, we need to determine whether or not they're sine or cosine, and then determine the equation. So my first step is to determine that it starts here and goes up and comes back down. This is indicative of a sine curve. Right here. So I know that it's sine. My next step is to determine the b value based on the amplitude. And it goes up 3 and down 3. Therefore, my b value is 3. My third step is to determine, actually, sorry, I just want to do that. I also want to determine the period, which is 2 pi. Then my third step is to determine the a value. 2 pi times a is therefore the period 2 pi. So a is simply 1. Once I know my a and my b value, I can go to my next step of writing my equation. Y equals, scale change, that's right, that's what we're going to do next. Our fourth step is to write our scale change. Our scale change, nothing happens to the x, and y gets multiplied by 3. And then my fifth step is to write the equation y equals 3 times the sine of x. Those are the 5 steps I'm going to go through. Alright, so let's go to this next one. I see that this is a cosine curve. My next step is to find my amplitude. Looks like I go 2, 4, 6. Looks like I'm above the 6. So, but not up to the next one. So I'm going to say that my amplitude is 7. Because it looks like if this is 6, that would be 7, because these are counting 2, 4, 6, and not at 8, so it must be at 7. So my b value is 7. I always do that. My period is still 2 pi. So my third step, 2 pi times a equals my new period. So a is simply 1. So my fourth step is to write my scale change. Nothing happens to the x, and y gets multiplied by 7. So my equation is y equals 7 times the cosine of x. Alright, let's go to number 3. Let's start notice on the y-axis what I'm trying to determine. Right? So this is going to be a negative cosine equation, because this is a u, but it's flipped upside down. The next step is to figure out the amplitude and period. Amplitude is up 4, down 4. But my b value is going to be negative 4 because it's a negative cosine. Then my period is still 2 pi. I keep not changing that, which makes 2 pi times a being 2 pi. A is 1. Notice I'm still showing this step because I know I need to know this step for when it does happen. So I don't want to just skip it. My fourth step is my scale change, which is x negative 4y. And so then my equation is y equals negative 4 cosine of x. Right, number 4. I have a sine curve. The next step is the amplitude and period. I'm going to write those down now so I don't forget. Alright, So this is 5. This looks like it's halfway, so that would make that, what, 7.5? So my amplitude is 7.5, which makes my B value 7.5. The period is only pi. So when I go to my next step, 2 pi times A equals pi. So when I solve for A, I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi, and I get that A equals 1/2. So B is 7.5 and A is 1/2. So my fourth step, my scale change is 1/2 x 7.5 y. So my equation, which is my fifth step, is y equals 7.5 sine of 2x, because remember, x lies in the equation. Right. Number 5. Look at my curve. That is a negative sine curve. My amplitude and period, I'll figure out next. Amplitude looks like it's up 2 and down 2. So my B value is -2 because it's a negative sine curve. And my period is pi divided by 5. So now I need to figure out 2 pi times A equals pi divided by 5. Okay, divide by 2 pi on both sides. So divide by 2 pi. A equals pi over 5 times 1 over 2 pi. These pi's cancel, and A equals 1/10. So my scale change is 1/10 x -2y. So my equation, y equals -2 sine 10x, because x lies in the equation. Right, the last one to do is number 6. Good. I'll make sure my work stands out here, so I'm going to do different colors as I'm running out of room. My first step is, looks like a negative cosine curve, an upside down U. Now I want to figure out my amplitude and period. I'm up 1, down 1. So my B value is -1. My period is 2. Notice it's not 2 pi, it's just 2. So 2 pi times A equals 2. Divide both sides by 2 pi. A equals 1 over pi. My scale change is therefore 1 over pi x -y. So my equation is y equals negative cosine. Since I'm dividing by pi, I'm going to multiply by pi in the equation. For the lesson master, for number 1, I think it would be easier if this was just y equals something. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 1/3. And I'm going to say for number 1 that my equation is y equals 1/3 sine of x over 2. For number 2, I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. And I'm going to get y equals 8 over 6, which I know is reduced to 4/3 sine of x. That 6 is not with the x. That's part of the y. That's number 2. And number 3 looks good. I don't need to change number 3's equation at all. I still have y equals 5 times the cosine of 3 pi x. Now, in order to state the period and the amplitude, I'm going to also write the scale change here for each of these. X is being divided by 2, so in the scale change it's going to be multiplied by 2. And we have 1/3 y. Number 2, my scale change, nothing happens to the x, and y is multiplied by 4/3. Number 3, x is multiplied by 3 pi, so it's going to be divided by 3 pi. And, or you can think of it as 1 over 3 pi times x, and 5 times y. So it might be easier maybe to think of it rather than divided by 3 pi, think of it as 1 over 3 pi times x. Like that, maybe write it that way. Now, for number 1, the first thing we're asked to do is state the period. Remember that period is 2 pi times the x scale change. So it's 2 pi times something in every one of these. In number 1, it's times 2. In number 2, it's times nothing. Well, times 1, no change. And in number 3, it's times 1 over 3 pi. So my new period here is 4 pi. My new period here is 2 pi. My new period here, the pi's cancel, is simply 2/3. The next part says state the amplitude. Remember that the amplitude is the absolute value of the y scale change. So we have the y scale change is 1/3. In number 2, it's 4/3. And in number 3, it's 5. I got those right from here. Right. Number 4 says consider the image of the graph. Find the amplitude. Remember, amplitude is the absolute value of the y scale change. So that's going to be 1/4. Period is always 2 pi times the x scale change. So 2 pi times 5. And I'll get 10 pi. Find an equation for the image. Y equals 1/4 cosine of, it says multiplied by 5, so in the equation divided by 5. Number 5, and you can skip number 6. Number 5 is like the other vibration one we did. I'm going to let you use your notes maybe to help you. I can just get you started on that. Remember that this right here, the vibration that displaces the air molecules, this right here, that's going to be my amplitude. And then you can use the frequency to find the A value. Remember that frequency equals 1 over the period. So I'm going to let you do